5 shots ring out in Miami's Bayfront Park, and the man who would remake America crumples in his open touring car. It is February 15, 1933, and Giuseppe Zangara, an Italian immigrant bricklayer consumed by chronic stomach pain and a burning hatred for those in power, has just changed history from 15 feet away. In our timeline, a woman named Lillian Cross grabbed Zangara's arm, deflecting his aim toward Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. But imagine for a moment that her reflexes came a fraction slower, that the bullets found their intended target. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President-elect of the United States, dies within hours at Jackson Memorial Hospital. 23 days before his scheduled inauguration, the nation's future is erased. In this alternate timeline exploration, we examine what could have happened and why the real history unfolded differently. The constitutional crisis begins before Roosevelt's body grows cold. The 20th Amendment has just been ratified, but it will not take effect until the next inauguration cycle. Lawyers across Washington debate whether John Nance Garner, the vice president-elect, automatically becomes president or merely president-elect himself. The distinction matters enormously. A president can act, a president-elect can only wait. What no one fully grasped in those chaotic February days, what would only become clear in the months ahead, was that America had not merely lost a man. It had lost an entire philosophy of governance that would now never be tested. John Nance Garner of Texas takes the oath of office on March 4, 1933, inheriting a nation in economic freefall. He is not the man Roosevelt was, and he does not pretend otherwise. A conservative Democrat who spent 30 years in Congress believing that balanced budgets were moral imperatives and federal intervention was constitutional overreach, Garner views the banking crisis through the lens of his Hill Country upbringing. Banks that made bad loans should fail. Depositors who chose poorly should learn. The market would correct itself as markets always did. His modest banking reforms satisfy no one. The bank holidays that Roosevelt would have ended with decisive federal guarantees instead stretch for months as Garner's Treasury officials negotiate piecemeal arrangements with individual state banking commissioners. Depositor panic, briefly contained, erupts again when rumors spread that the federal government lacks either the will or the authority to backstop the system. By May, unemployment has climbed past 27%. Bread lines in major cities stretch for blocks. The Hoovervilles that everyone expected the new administration to demolish instead grow larger and more permanent. Garner, a man of genuine principle, cannot bring himself to embrace the deficit spending that might provide relief. He does not understand that his ideology has become the nation's straitjacket. Without the Works Progress Administration, without the Civilian Conservation Corps, without the alphabet soup of agencies that would have put millions to work, the summer of 1933 becomes something unprecedented in American history. Desperation has a mathematics all its own. General strikes paralyzed Toledo in May, Minneapolis in July, San Francisco in August. These are not the carefully negotiated work stoppages of ordinary labor disputes. These are eruptions of rage from men who have watched their families go hungry while grain rots in silos and factories stand idle. In Minneapolis, police killed 2 strikers on a single afternoon. In San Francisco, the National Guard occupies the waterfront for 6 weeks. The Midwest convulses with a different kind of fury. When sheriffs arrive to execute farm foreclosures in Iowa and Nebraska, they are met by crowds of neighbors armed with pitchforks and shotguns. The Farmers' Holiday Association, which began as a peaceful protest movement, turns increasingly militant. Mortgage holders are dragged from their automobiles and beaten. Judges who sign foreclosure orders receive death threats written in blood. Garner responds as he believes the Constitution requires, with restraint, with deference to state authority, with confidence that local officials will restore order. His restraint is interpreted as weakness. The violence spreads into the vacuum left by federal inaction steps Huey Pierce Long, the kingfish of Louisiana, who understands something that Garner never will. Desperate people need more than lectures about fiscal responsibility. By the spring of 1934, Long's Share Our Wealth clubs claim 7 million members in every state of the Union. His message is simple, radical, and perfectly calibrated for the moment. No family should earn less than $2,000 per year. No fortune should exceed $5 million. The wealth hoarded by Rockefellers and Morgans belongs to the people who created it. Long barnstorms the country, filling stadiums and fairgrounds, his voice carrying over the radio to millions who have never heard a politician speak their language. Father Charles Coughlin matches him audience for audience. Broadcasting from his shrine of the Little Flower in Royal Oak, Michigan, the radio priest commands 40 million weekly listeners with sermons that blend Catholic social teaching with increasingly virulent attacks on bankers, gold hoarders, and what he calls the money changers who crucify mankind upon a cross of debt. His National Union for Social Justice becomes a de facto third party, separate from Long's movement but pursuing parallel ends. Garner watches these twin insurgencies with growing alarm and complete helplessness. But the forces Long and Coughlin had unleashed would soon converge in ways neither man anticipated. In the summer of 1934, a second bonus army marches on Washington. They are veterans of the Great War, men who were promised payment for their service and then told they must wait until 1945 to collect. In 1932, Douglas MacArthur dispersed their encampment with cavalry and tanks, a spectacle of military force against ragged veterans that horrified the nation. Now they have returned, larger in number and angrier in disposition, and they are not alone. Unemployed workers from a dozen cities swell their ranks. The encampment on the Anacostia Flats houses 40,000 people by August. On the West Coast, longshoremen walk off the job in May and do not return for 6 months. The strike spreads to teamsters, to warehouse workers, to sailors. Commerce along the Pacific seaboard effectively ceases. When strikebreakers attempt to move cargo in San Pedro, the resulting battle leaves 11 dead. Martial law is declared in California, Oregon, and Washington. By year's end, labor violence has claimed more than 100 lives nationwide. Garner deploys the army to restore order, a decision that satisfies neither the strikers nor the industrialists. The left sees federal troops as tools of capital. The right sees them as insufficiently aggressive. MacArthur, still Army Chief of Staff, quietly begins planning for the contingency of widespread insurrection. As the 1936 election approaches, President Garner surveys the wreckage of his administration and announces he will not seek a term in his own right. The Democratic Convention in Philadelphia becomes a civil war conducted by parliamentary procedure. The party's progressive wing demands aggressive federal intervention, banking reform, labor rights. The conservative establishment insists these measures would destroy the Constitution they swore to uphold. After 73 ballots and 3 fistfights on the convention floor, the delegates nominate Newton Baker of Ohio, Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of War, a compromise candidate who pleases no one. Huey Long has been waiting for this moment. His announcement that he will seek the presidency as an independent sends shockwaves through both parties. Long's campaign draws equally from disaffected Democrats and working-class Republicans, from organized labor and desperate farmers, from everyone who believes the system has failed them. Father Coughlin endorses him, delivering 40 million weekly listeners to the Long coalition. Republican Alf Landon of Kansas wins the presidency with 38% of the popular vote, the lowest winning total in American history. Long carries Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Wisconsin. He wins 6 million votes nationwide. The mandate for governance belongs to no one. While America tears itself apart, the world moves toward catastrophe without American counterweight. The Landon administration, consumed by the unfinished business of domestic crisis, retreats from international commitments. Military modernization, already neglected during the Garner years, stalls completely as Congress refuses appropriations for new weapons systems. The Army remains smaller than Portugal's. The Navy lacks the aircraft carriers that would prove decisive in the Pacific. The Air Corps flies biplanes that European powers have already rendered obsolete. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler watches American chaos with satisfaction. Washington's preoccupation with internal strife means no interference with his plans for continental domination. When German tanks roll into Poland in September 1939, American reaction is muted, divided, uncertain. Isolationists command massive public support. Interventionists lack the political coalition to overcome them. President Landon, a cautious man by nature, chooses caution. The fall of France in 1940 produces alarm, but no mobilization. Lend-Lease, the program that would have made America the arsenal of democracy, dies in committee. Britain fights alone, supplied only by what it can pay for in cash, and carry on its own ships. Pearl Harbor comes as it was always going to come, on a quiet Sunday morning in December 1941, when Japanese aircraft turned Battleship Row into a graveyard. But the America that awakens to war is not the America that history knows. Industrial mobilization, lacking the foundation of New Deal planning agencies, proceeds in fits and starts. Factories that might have converted to war production in months require years. Labor relations poisoned by a decade of violence and recrimination do not suddenly heal when the enemy attacks. Strikes continue even as soldiers die overseas. Congress passes labor conscription laws that would have been unthinkable in Roosevelt's America, forcing workers into war industries under threat of imprisonment. The arsenal of democracy eventually sputters to life, but it runs 2 years behind the schedule history would have written. The war that could have ended in 1945 grinds on. The costs that could have been measured in hundreds of thousands are measured in millions. The world that emerges from the carnage is harder, more bitter, more suspicious of the government power that might have prevented such suffering. On a February evening in Miami, a woman's reflexes saved more than one man's life. They saved a vision of what American governance could become. Energetic, experimental, willing to try and fail and try again. In her absence, we glimpse the nation that might have been, a nation that found its way to victory eventually, but only after learning that some absences cannot be filled, some moments cannot be recovered, and some men are more consequential than anyone knows until they are gone.